Federalist 57, Part 3. We'll start at paragraph 14. Such will be the relation between the House of Representatives and their constituents. Okay, this part is important because he says these four courts, and when he uses the word court, he's kind of referring to umbilical cord that gives sustenance and life to a loved child. So he says these cords, ours are not just a rope that we've tied ourselves with. It's something more than that. It's life that's connected us. Duty, gratitude, interest, ambition itself are the cords by which they will be bound to fidelity and sympathy with the great mass of the people. So these 65 members of the first Congress, the first House of Representatives, will be duty bound. They're because of gratitude, interest, and ambition. Remember, in 51 says a healthy dose of it is good. This way you can check the real ambitious men that are in office. You can stop them. So he says all these things are good to keep the system intact, to keep it healthy, to keep it right. So let me just start rereading this because this is pretty important and beautiful. Such will be the relation between the House of Representatives and their constituents. Duty, gratitude, interest, ambition itself are the cords by which they will be bound to fidelity and sympathy with the great mass of the people. It is possible that these may all be insufficient to control the caprice and wickedness of men. But are they not all that government will admit and that human prudence can devise? Are they not the genuine and the characteristic means by which Republican government provides for the liberty and happiness of the people? Are they not the identical means on which every state government in the Union relies for the attainment of these important ends? What then are we to understand by the objection which this paper has combated? What are we to say to the men who profess the most flaming zeal for Republican government, yet boldly impeach the fundamental principle of it, who pretend to be champions for the right and the capacity of the people to choose their own rulers, yet maintain that they will prefer those only who will immediately and infallibly betray the trust committed to them? So he says, seems like our critics, the anti-federalists that keep on writing these articles in the papers criticizing this Constitution, seems like sometimes they forget that a government has got to be both free and secure. On freedom, defend your freedom, at the same time have enough energy, have enough wisdom, have enough strength to stand on its feet, to be able to defend those liberties. And they criticize us because we followed every rule that a Republican government has to follow. But they criticize us just because we have allowed 65 members in the initial Congress, the first Congress, to sit in the House of Representatives. They say that will violate their liberty. And here, in a little bit, he's going to bring examples not only from Britain, but states themselves to say they're wrong. They're just making a lot of noise and they're not paying attention to what we've done. Okay, let me continue. Were the objection to be read by one who had not seen the mode prescribed by the Constitution for the choice of representatives, he could suppose nothing less than that some unreasonable qualification of property was annexed to the right of suffrage. He says, yes, if somebody hasn't read the document we've got out of the Philadelphia Convention, our Constitution, yes, they might be able to believe our critics' lies or half-truths that we've attached such big qualifications for people to either vote or run for office that the whole Republican form of government is not going to be in place. But he says they're wrong. Or that the right of eligibility was limited to persons of particular families or fortunes, or at least that the modes prescribed by the state constitutions was, in some respect or other, very grossly departed. We have seen how far such a supposition would err as to the two first points, nor would it in fact be less erroneous as to the last. The only difference discoverable between the two cases is that each representative of the United States will be elected by 5,000 or 6,000 citizens, whilst in the individual states the election of representatives is left to about as many hundreds. Will it be pretended that this difference is sufficient to justify an attachment to the state governments and an abhorrence to the federal government? If this be the point on which the objection turns, it deserves to be examined. See, he's saying the only thing that might be reasonable for our critics to bring up is to say that on the average, every member of the House of Representatives is going to be elected by 5,000-6,000 people. Whereas on the average, every member of the state legislature will be elected by 500 or 600 people. He says, I give you that. I agree with that. But does that mean that just because the election is in the hands of 5,000 to 6,000 people, they are not going to do a better job than 500 or 600 people? He says, you're totally wrong, and we're going to look at some examples. But first he says, is it supported by reason? This cannot be said without maintaining that 5,000 or 6,000 citizens are less capable of choosing a fit representative or more liable to be corrupted by an unfit one than 500 or 600. Reason, on the contrary, assures us that as in so great a number, a fit representative would be most likely to be found. So the choice would be less likely to be diverted from him by the intrigues of the ambitious or the bribes of the rich. He says, actually 5,000, 6,000 is pretty good, because there's a good chance that a rich person, one way or another, can corrupt the election system in a way that have more influence by bribes, by other things, to influence 500-600 people than he or she would be able to influence 5,000 or 6,000 people. Plus, as I said, constantly remember that his argument is, he doesn't mention it, but he's looking back at Federalist 10, where he says, actually, we want to make the district larger so that you can have people that come to the top and want to run for office. They'll be wiser, they will be refined. Their attachment will not be only to one small group, but because they have to represent multiple interests, their attachment will be balanced and wise. So this is kind of what is in the background of Madison's thought. And the next paragraph, is the consequence from this doctrine admissible if we say that 500 or 600 citizens are as many as can jointly exercise their right of suffrage? Must we not deprive the people of the immediate choice of their public servants in every instance where the administration of the government does not require as many of them as will amount to 1 for that number of citizens? Okay. When we come back in the next video, we'll talk about the rest of Federalist 57, and then he brings in examples from the states, the 13 states, and he says, look at the districts, look at some of these counties. The number of people that vote for one candidate is as high as the number that are going to be voting for the representatives that will be going to the House of Representatives. So he actually states cases, and with example, he shows that these people are being one-sided. They don't look at what's happening in the states, but the minute we've suggested the same thing for the federal government, they're in uproar and they're saying we're trying to start an oligarchy, and that is far from the truth.